Welcome to a brand new Timmy's Top 10. And today we're going to look at the top 10 of the best cards of old school Magic the Gathering 1993-1994. To make this list, I've looked at all the cards printed in the core sets Alpha, Beta, and Limited, and the expansion sets Arabian Nights, Antiquities, Legends, and The Dark. When you look at all these cards, you come to a total of 879 individual printed cards. And then the real challenge began. So I started, of course, with just a list. I made a short list, and then I made a short list of that short list, and eventually I had 10 cards. But while I was in the process, I realized that most of the cards linked to three main themes, and those themes are tempo, resources, and the trading of those resources. Now, all the cards on my list were connected with these three main themes. Now, let me just give you an example per theme so you have an idea of what I'm talking about. So tempo in Magic, turn 1, you play 1 land, and you can play a 1-land spell, right? Turn 2, you play 2 lands, you play a 2-land spell. Turn 3, etc., right? And the higher the casting cost, usually the more powerful the spell. So if you can get ahead in tempo, it means you can play more powerful spells, and that can get you ahead in the game. So a well-known tempo card, for example, is this one, Dark Ritual. So Dark Ritual is 1 black and gives you 3 black back. So basically what it does, it catapults you 2 mana ahead in that tempo play. So it's a tempo card. And now let's look at the resources. So resources is all about how many spells do you have available to cast. In other words, it's all about card draw. What can you do? And also, what kind of cards do you have on the board that can help you to get more resources? And one of the most well-known and used cards in old school Magic is this one, JM Daytome. Look at it. It's 4 to cast, 4 and tap for a card. That's 8 mana in for a single card. But this is so good. Card draw is so important in Magic that this card sees play in probably the best deck in Magic, the deck, right? Card advantage, having more resources than your opponent is super important and usually means that you are going to win the game. So obviously, a lot of cards in this list are connected with that theme, resources. They help you to get more resources than your opponent. And then we are at the third category, trading resources. Now, trading resources is all about you spending a card for card or a card for multiple cards, making the card even better. Let me first give you an example of a 1-for-1 trade card. Look at this one, Swords to Plowshares. Super good, amazing, but what you're doing with this card, you're trading resources. You use your Swords to Plowshares, you destroy a card of the opponent, right? Your opponent loses a creature. You're trading those resources. Now, a lot of cards are just 1-for-1 trading, like Disenchant, a well-timed Lightning Bolt, but certain cards are better at trading resources. What about this one? Nevinyrral's Disc. Nevinyrral's Disc, of course, popular because if you time it well, you get a really good deal out of your Nevinyrral's Disc. Your opponent loses a lot of resources and you only lose, well, maybe only your disc if you play it right. So trading resources is an important category, and if you have a good trading resources card, it's probably going to be a staple in old school Magic. So now that you know how I kind of got to this list and what my thought process was, we are ready to jump into the top 10, but wait a minute. We're first going to have some honorable mentions. And here are the 4 honorable mentions, and yes, they're all lands, they're all super good, and even looking at them now, I wonder, shouldn't I have put some of them into this top 10? I mean, let me know at the end, when you've seen the whole top 10, let me know in the comments below. But the 4 honorable mentions are Pendelhaven, City of Brass, Mishra's Workshop, and Strip Mine. And now onwards we go to number 10 of the list. And on number 10, we find Mishra's Factory, perhaps the card that's loved and hated the most in old school. And I mean, what makes this card so good is, again, it's a land, so you cannot counter it. But at the same time, it's also a win con, because you can make it into a 2/2 creature and attack your opponent. Especially when you play control, this can be really, really good. You can also copy it with Copy Artifact, and the Copy Artifact then comes into play as a land that can immediately pump the factory you just copied. It's a little bit insane, it's a little bit broken, but this is old school. It is all broken. Anyway, let's continue to number 9. And on number 9, we find the first Power 9 card, Time Twister. Time Twister is an incredibly powerful and broken card in old school Magic, right? You pay 1 blue and 2 for the sorcery, and then you shuffle your graveyard in your hand back into your library, and you get to draw 7 new cards. I mean, your opponent gets to do the same, but who cares if you've got an Underworld Dreams on the table, or if maybe you've got multiple Vices, or if maybe you play a burn deck and you want to get that burn back into your hand to finish your opponent, or maybe you play a combo deck or a prison deck and you're looking for a few final components. Time Twister will probably get you there. So this is a really, 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 really good card and deserves a spot here in this top 10. And now onwards we go to number 8. And on number 8, we probably find the most powerful white spell ever created in the game of Magic the Gathering, and that is Balance. Balance is a sorcery for 1 white and 1 that reads, whichever player has more lands in play must discard enough lands of his or her choice to equalize the number of lands both players have in play. Cards in hand and creatures in play must be equalized the same way. Creatures lost in this manner may not be regenerated. And again, this is such a broken and strong card. It's just crazy. No wonder this card is restricted. I mean, if you time it right, this can be a Mind Twist and a Wrath of God and an Armageddon all in one card. And that just for 2 mana. 2 mana. It's insane. Especially when you consider that we're playing in a format that has Moxen, right? Because Balance doesn't count in non-artifact creatures. So if you're playing with a lot of artifacts, mana rocks and stuff, this card gets even better. I'm sure some people are looking at this thinking, why is this not number 1? I don't know. I have to make tough choices. Anyway, I've put it on number 8. Now let's continue to number 7. And on number 7, we find an all-star favorite, a card that still sees a ton of play today, and that is Sol Ring. Sol Ring is an artifact for 1 that you can tap to give 2 colorless mana to your mana pools. So I can hear you think, okay, why is it so good that it should be in this top 10 and not even on number 10? No, it's all the way up to number 7. Well, the reason for that is that Sol Ring gives you an immediate advantage. The moment it comes into play, you have a mana advantage, and you keep having that mana advantage. I probably don't have to explain to you how powerful a mana advantage is in Magic. It's like going fast forward in time. In a way, it's like a mana time walk, you know? Could that be a thing, a mana time walk? I mean, there are circumstances where I'd rather have the Sol Ring than a Mox or maybe even a Black Lotus in specific circumstances. Remember, I'm saying specific circumstances. Don't nail me down on this. Okay, anyway, Sol Ring, number 7. I'm keeping it there. I'm happy with the place. Now let's go onwards to number 6, the number of El Diablo. You guessed it, it's Demonic Tutor. Demonic Tutor is a sorcery for 1 black and 1 that reads, you may search your library for 1 card and take it into your hand. Reshuffle your library afterwards. What makes Demonic Tutor so good is it's kind of the Black Vesuvian Doppelganger, but then for all cards, right? Think about it. You play it at sorcery speed. That's not great, but still, you play it for 1 black and 1. You can look up any card in your deck. So it's like every card has a +1 behind it, right? You've got 1 more option to draw that card, and it's especially good if you're looking for a specific silver bullet. Now, in case you don't know what that means, the expression silver bullet means you're looking for a card that can get you out of a difficult situation, a card that's probably devastating for your opponent and really good for you. Let me give you a scenario. You're playing against one of those 5-color good stuff decks, and your opponent has a very greedy mana base. Your Demonic Tutor is going to allow you to look up that Blood Moon that crushes his entire deck. Okay, another example. You're playing creatureless, and your opponent's board is full of little creatures, and you're under pressure. Your Demonic Tutor allows you to look up a Wrath of God, burn the whole board down, and you're right back in the game. Talking about getting back in the game. Guess what? You're behind. Your opponent has more cards, more lands, more creatures. You use your Demonic Tutor to look up a balance, and boom, you're back into the game. Or what about Arabian Nights? You look up that 1 city in a bottle you're playing main, and bam, you're back in the game. No, it's better. You're ahead in the game. So I guess I'm making my point, right? Demonic Tutor is insane, it's awesome, and also it's really easy to splash with just 1 black in that mana cost. And after this love song about Demonic Tutor and all the ways you can use it in old school Magic, we're going to continue our little walk to number 5. And on number 5, we find another piece of Power 9. It is Time Walk. Time Walk is a sorcery for 1 blue and 1 that simply reads, take an extra turn after this one. So you don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand why this card is so incredibly good. Like I guess almost in every game it's good to get an extra turn, right? Well, I'm sure there are some games where you don't want to have turns, but anyway, Time Walk, a really good card. But there are some fun facts that I would like to share with you, and one of those is that Time Walk has a perfect rules text. If they would reprint the card today, and of course they're not because it's reserve list, don't worry, but if they would reprint it today, they would actually keep the same rules text. And there's only one other card where that's the case. Do you know which one that is? Exactly. The other card is Stream of Life. So if they would reprint the core set today, they wouldn't change the rules text on Time Walk and Stream of Life. Those are the only two cards that they wouldn't make any changes. Isn't that fascinating? Now, the other thing I wanted to share with you is about this painting. This is called The Persistence of Memory, and it's painted by Salvador Dali. And according to many people, this was the inspiration for the art on Time Walk. The problem with this theory, though, is that Amy Weber never confirmed it and actually never mentioned Salvador Dali as one of her inspirations for her Magic the Gathering artwork. So it's probably not true, but then again, when I'm looking at the art, I kind of get that vibe. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And after our little art class, we are ready to move on to number 4. And in number 4, we find some really fine jewelry. Yes, here they are, the Moxen. So the Moxen almost made it into the top 3, almost. They're on spot number 4. And as you can see, I put them together as a group. I'm not going to split them up. I do agree that some Moxen are probably better. You could argue that. And why are they better? I can already hear you say that to the screen. Timmy, tell me why. Why do you think some Moxen are better? Well, it's all about splashing color. So if you look, for example, at blue, blue is splashed a lot as a color. Why? Because people want to play Ancestral Recall, Time Walk, and Time Twister. So that means that Mox Sapphire is a little bit more wanted and more expensive than the other Moxen because people want to play that. Talking about splashing cards, I think Mox Jet is a very close second because a lot of people want to splash Mind Twist and Demonic Tutor. So that's why those Moxen are a little bit more wanted than the other Moxen. But the other Moxen are fantastic as well. I mean, I love playing my Mox Ruby in my Goblin deck, right? Play out my Goblin King a turn early. That's just awesome. And just in general, of course, Moxen, they have no downside. That's why the card is so good. There's no downside. It's 0 mana. You play it for nothing. You get a mana in return. It's only win-win-win. It's a huge tempo play. You can use it over and over again. You don't have to sack it like other artifact mana, like for example the Black Lotus. No, you don't have to sack this. You can tap it today. You can tap it tomorrow. You can tap it any other day. It's perfect. So let me know in the comments below which Mox is your favorite and why. And we have reached number 3, and on number 3 we're gonna find a card that's actually a personal favorite of Richard Garfield. He designed the card and actually designed this entire set, and I'm talking of course about Library of Alexandria. Library of Alexandria is a card from Arabian Nights. It's a land that reads, tap to add 1 mana to your mana pool or draw a card from your library. You may use the card drawing ability only if you have exactly 7 cards in your hand. Okay, so let's go back to the development days of Arabian Nights. I think that Richard Garfield probably thought, okay, because I've put in that 7 cards in hand clause, it's probably not overpowered. And now, of course, we know it's completely bonkers. I mean, it's just crazy. Just tap it and draw a card. You don't have to pay anything else. That's sick, you know? And also considering the fact that if you don't have 7 cards in hand, there are ways in Magic to get back to 7 cards in hand. And let's say even in the option that you're just top decking it as your single card in your hand, even then it's kind of useful because you can just play it out as a normal land and it still taps for mana. So it doesn't set you back, you know what I mean? You don't get punished for playing out this card. And what I mean by that is I've recently started experimenting with Diamond Valley, another beautifully powerful card, but that card cannot tap for mana. So it's a great card, it's very powerful, but when you play that out as your land for turn, you're slowing yourself down. The same thing can be said for Maze of Ith. This card doesn't have that drawback because you can still tap it for mana. It is just absolutely bonkers, and it deserves a spot here on number 3. Exciting, we're gonna go into the number 2 spot, and on the number 2 spot we find probably the most legendary card of all, and maybe some of you were expecting to see this one on number 1, but I've put this beautiful artifact on number 2, and you guessed it, it is Black Lotus. Black Lotus is an artifact for 0 that reads, adds 3 mana of any single color of your choice to your mana pool, then is discarded. Tapping this artifact can be played as an interrupt. So why is Black Lotus so incredibly good? Well, remember when I talked about the 3 main themes that I kind of discovered in the cards in the top 10 list? They were tempo, resources, and those trading of resources. Well, this is the ultimate tempo card, and also it gives you a lot of resources in the form of 3 mana in the color of your choice. It's insane, and there's no drawback. It's 0 to cast. You can sack it, you get 3 mana. Imagine doing this turn 1 and you're playing in black. You can play Juzam Jin turn 1. That's a 5/5. You only need 4 swings. And I know you're already thinking, yeah, but Timmy, if your opponent has a Swords to Plowshares, absolutely true, so maybe you shouldn't do that when you're playing against white, but it's just an example. So you can use it to ramp out a big creature very early in the game. But there are, of course, way more ways of how you can use Black Lotus. One of the cool things with this card is because it gives you extra mana for nothing, right? It's 0 to cast. You can do 2 things a turn instead of 1 thing. And that can be huge in Magic. Instead of going 1 step forward in a turn, you're going 2 steps forward in a turn. Maybe you can play something out and remove something. Or, well, if you're a blue player, you already thought about this, you can keep counter mana open. One of the things I use this for in my blue Timmy deck, Timmy Spellbook, is just to play it out, leave it on the board the entire game so that I can always have that threat that I have mana to play a counter spell. And if I then draw into an X spell, because Black Lotus is amazing with X spells, for example, if I draw into my Brain Geyser, I can use that 3 mana for Black Lotus to draw 3 cards. So all of a sudden, my Black Lotus is turned into an Ancestral Recall. And when you're playing, for example, red, you can turn your Black Lotus into a Lightning Bolt. How, you may ask yourself? Well, Fireball. Sack it to the Fireball, 3 extra mana equals 3 extra damage. And there's actually a meaner way of using this card in an X spell, and that card is Mind Twist. Can you imagine having an opening hand with a Mox Jet, a Black Lotus, a Swamp, and of course Mind Twist? I mean, you can just twist the hand of your opponent in turn 1 for 4. That is insane, absolutely insane. Another really good way to use this card is in combination with Balance. Remember, Balance doesn't count non-creature artifacts. So again, you can just drop this on a battlefield and it basically is going to force your opponent to discard an extra card if you balance after that. But I mean, I can keep rambling on about all the ways you can use Black Lotus to show you how powerful it is, but everybody who's played with the card will tell you the same. This card is insanely bonkers, insanely powerful, and yet I've put it on number 2 and not on number 1. Maybe you already know what's going to come to number 1, but before I show you the number 1 in this top 10 list, first, some honorable mentions. And the honorable mentions in this last honorable mentions list are Chaos Orb, Mind Twist, Regrowth, and Wheel of Fortune. And I think especially the first 2 cards mentioned were very, very close into making it into the top 10. Maybe they should have. I mean, Chaos Orb is the old school card. I love flipping cards. And Mind Twist, boy, that card can be devastating, especially when you combine it with cards like Black Lotus and the Moxen. But hey, they just didn't make the cut. Feel free, of course, to disagree. If you do, please let me know in the comments below. And now onwards we go to number 1. And we have reached the number 1 spot. Oh, exciting, exciting, exciting. And on number 1, we find our black favorite, Contract from Below. Okay, I'm just kidding. We're of course not including anti cards because they're simply not legal, but if we would include anti, this card would definitely be on number 1. But instead we have, can I have a drum roll please? On number 1 we have Ancestral Recall. Okay, calm down audience, please calm down. I know it's a big deal. This is number 1, Ancestral Recall, but I mean, let's be honest, you probably expected Ancestral Recall to be pretty high on this list, right? Maybe not on number 1, maybe you have it somewhere else on the list. If you do, please let me know and let me know what is your number 1. But for me, the reason it's number 1 is that this card is always good at every stage in the game. This card is always a great card to draw. Considering, of course, that you have the blue mana to spend it. You could say that's a downside of Ancestral Recall, right? If we look at the other 2 cards in the top 3, the Library of Alexandria and the Black Lotus, you can always play them, right? It's never a problem. Well, I guess with Library of Alexandria, you've got City in a Bottle to think about. But I mean, you should always be able to cast them. And with Ancestral Recall, of course, you do need that 1 blue mana, but let's just, for sake of argument, say you've got the blue mana, then this card is good at every stage in the game. And I actually found a post on Reddit. Oh, Reddit, what a great resource you are. And I found a post on Reddit by Drizzle Whizzle. And this is a post from 4 years ago. And what he does, he's explaining several scenarios. And he says, you know, in each of these scenarios, Ancestral Recall is really good. And I was reading it and I think, yeah, this makes perfect sense. So I'm just going to read it out to you. He's summing up a few scenarios. So I'm just going to start with the first scenario that he mentions. Imagine that the game is parity. You and the opponent are stuck, and you're both waiting to draw something to break the stalemate. Ancestral Recall gives you 3 chances to draw that card that you need, and it leaves you enough mana to play it after you draw it. So this is a very good point, right? Because it's only 1 blue mana to cast, you can probably play Ancestral Recall and do something with the cards that you draw. That's just insane. And remember, instant speed. It's not even a sorcery. Okay, let's just continue with the second scenario. So he also has a scenario here where he says, imagine that you're behind. You need to draw something powerful to get back into the game. Ancestral Recall gives you 3 chances at doing that, and again leaves you the mana to cast the spell that you need. Right? So if you draw into, for example, that balance to get you back in the game, or maybe a Wrath of God as a board wipe, or whatever other card that you need, maybe the Lightning Bolt to kill your opponent because he's on 3. Again, Ancestral Recall gives you 3 opportunities to find that card. And again, only 1 blue, so you can probably also play that card out. So it's really, really good. Now he's got another scenario where he says you're ahead in the game. So you're ahead in the game, and you've dumped your hand on the board. You have more creatures than your opponent. Ancestral Recall draws you 3 more cards for 1 mana. With your leftover mana, you can probably play another threat and win even faster, before your opponent can shift the momentum. So I look at this a little bit different. I think, okay, imagine you're ahead of the game and you've got 1 card in your hand and your opponent's got 4 cards in your hand. Then you know as soon as the opponent has, for example, found a balance, or maybe some other way to deal with the cards on the board, like a Nevinyrral's Disc, then you're behind because your opponent has more cards in hand. Your Ancestral Recall will allow you to, in response, draw 3 cards, maybe find a counterspell in there to protect the permanents you have on the board. And if it doesn't find a counterspell, you at least have 3 other cards to kind of rebuild, your board state. So again, even when you're ahead in the game, it's a really good card to have. Now, another scenario that he writes about is early game. So he's saying, imagine you're early in the game. And this is something I recognize myself. And he says, and you're about to miss a land drop. That has happened to me numerous times with Timmy's Spellbook. And as long as you have that 1 blue mana and Ancestral Recall in hand, you get 3 new opportunities to draw that land. And the thing is, especially early on in the game, you don't want to get behind on your land drops. That can mean a Time Walk turn for your opponent if you miss that land drop. So you really want to have that Ancestral Recall. And talking about Time Walk, when you have Ancestral Recall, all your powered cards, all your silver bullets, you're going to see them more often because you go quicker through your deck. It's just a really, really good card. So he actually has one more scenario. You know what? I'm going to read that to you as well. So he says, imagine it's late game. You and your opponent have both emptied your hand, and your opponent wiped the board with his last card. You're both drawing off the top, trying to find a creature. Ancestral Recall can draw you a threat, or a counterspell to stop your opponent from playing the threat that he drew, or removal to get rid of the threat your opponent drew, or, perfect scenario, all 3 of those. So again, Ancestral Recall, at every stage in the game, it is just a really good card, and that is why I've put it on number 1. And that was the top 10 of best cards in 93 and 94. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And please let me know what your top 10 looks like. I think it would be great if in the comments we see all these top 10 lists. And it's just interesting to see what different choices did we all make, right? I'm sure you disagree with a few of my decisions. I'm sure you're missing a couple of cards in my list. Again, I would love to hear from you. And before you go, if you've enjoyed this video, please also leave a like and share it on your socials. There are also more top 10 lists that I have. I've got a special playlist with all the top 10 lists on Timmy Talk. So if you want to check out more top 10s, just click on the info card that's appearing right now. And another thing you can do is, of course, become a sponsor of the show. If you enjoy the content that I make, please consider supporting me by becoming a patron of the show. Check out patreon.com/TimmyTalks for all the information. And for now, now, thank you very much for watching and keep slinging those spells.
What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? Early in the morning, way hey and up she rises, way hey and up she rises, way hey and up she rises. Early in the morning, put him in the longboat until he's sober. Put him in the longboat until he's sober. Put him in the longboat until he's sober. Early in the morning, way hey and up she rises, way hey and up she rises. She rises early in the morning. Pull out the plug and wet him all over. Pull out the plug and wet him all over. Pull out the plug and wet him all over. Early in the morning. Way hey up she rises. Way hey up she rises. Way hey up she rises early in the morning. What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? Put him in the scoundrel, 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 put him in the scoundrel. Early in the morning, way hey up she rises, way hey up she rises, way hey up she rises early in the morning.
Icketus, ficketus, sumba, kazee.